For more on this, joining me now from the British capital is Fawaz Gerges, who is a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics. Great to have you here with us again, Professor. You know, let me begin by asking you, you were listening to the press conference there by European leaders on the war in Ukraine, and you know, something really stood out for me, the kind of language that they were using against President Putin and Russia, of course, for the killings that Russia has executed in Ukraine over the past 3 years. But you know, when you look at the broader dynamics and try to compare what's happening in Ukraine to what has happened in Gaza, I mean, Netanyahu has done far worse crimes, war crimes in the Gaza Strip, but these European leaders never talk about Netanyahu in that fashion. Why is that?
Well, I really think you are asking a foundational, fundamental question. You cannot understand the moral failure of the West when it comes to Gaza without comparing the West stand towards the Ukraine and with the West stand towards what happened in Gaza. Just to give you an idea what Prime Minister Starmer said today. He condemned the killing of few civilians in the Ukraine, particularly a few children, as he should have, right? The killing of children, a few children and civilians in the Ukraine is basically outrageous.
Absolutely.
But not even a single word about the killing of almost 20,000 Palestinian children. He talked about the outraged European response to Putin's trying to seize Ukrainian land. He hardly any word about Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and now in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Syria. And this tells you the reason why many of us in the world really look at Israel's war in Gaza. This is not just an Israel's war. It's really the West is complicit. And I'm not saying it, I don't say it very lightly. You cannot understand the ability of Benjamin Netanyahu to do what he has done in Gaza without the complicity of the West and the direct operational support for Israel's war by the United States and Germany and the United Kingdom to a smaller extent. And the press conference itself really reveals the contradictions of Western policies toward the Russian invasion of the Ukraine and Benjamin Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza.
And right, of course, when you look at the rhetoric that's coming from European capitals when it comes to Gaza, on cameras they would talk about how they want to help the Palestinian people, how they want to alleviate the pain and sufferings of Palestinians in the besieged enclave. But in reality, I think we heard what Marco Rubio said. They want to suspend UNRWA's operation in the Gaza Strip altogether. They will not allow the biggest aid agency in the Gaza Strip to work at all. So this is the kind of help that is coming from the West to the Palestinians?
Well, I mean, again, I need to remind your audience that it was President Trump in his first term, not now. He basically ended American financial support for the United Nations organizations responsible for Palestinian refugees. It was not just now. It was, almost 6 years ago. And why? Very simply, because Israel is terrified of the whole idea of Palestinian refugees, because this particular United Nations organizations keeps the idea of a Palestinian refugees, whether you're talking about Lebanon or Syria or Jordan, alive. There are almost 5 million Palestinian refugees, and the United Nations organization responsible for the refugees basically keeps the idea alive. Secondly, what really the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said today, it tells you a great deal about the contempt of the Trump administration for international law. It was just a couple of days ago. when the International Court of Justice made it very clear that Israel, as an occupying power, has no right to prevent United Nations organizations from delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza. And in fact, its accusation against the United Nations organization is basically not founded on any facts. And it demanded that Israel does give the United Nations access to Gaza. 2 days ago, today, Marco Rubio basically said, we don't care. He doesn't care about the International Court of Justice decision. And more than that, the Trump administration's sanctioned the judges in the International Criminal Court, who wanted Netanyahu to be responsible. There's a warrant on Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister as really responsible for the genocide in Gaza. Final point is that we're talking about the United Nations and humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israel so far, despite the ceasefire, has not allowed any escalation of humanitarian aid to Gaza, according to United Nations officials. And what Marco Rubio has said in the past 24 hours, Israel has vetoed not only on the entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza, but even on the composition of the international security force that is being formed in order to really come to Gaza and disarm Hamas. And also American officials are making it very clear that, in fact, they might start reconstruction in the Israeli-occupied part of Gaza. They have an idea to divide Gaza into two enclaves. The Israeli-led enclave with 53% of Gaza and the Hamas enclave. They want to start reconstruction in the Israeli enclave, right, and basically keep the other part really without any reconstruction for now.
Right, and I think you make a great point there that 52% of Gaza is under Israeli control right now, and we're talking phase one of the ceasefire deal. We don't know whether or not this deal is going to go into phase two, but if it does go, then the Israeli control will come down to 37%. And if phase two is also successful, and if we go into phase three, then the control would be around 18%. So even if this deal is successfully implemented with all three phases, even then there's going to be Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip. So how come it's being presented as a victory or perhaps something good to the Palestinians?
Well, that's exactly true. Israel has no intention of ending its occupation of Gaza, even, as you said, even if we proceed from phase one to phase two to phase three. Israel will establish a buffer zone that has between 18 and 20% of Gaza under occupation, in the same way that it does in the West Bank and other parts in Syria and in Lebanon. And what this tells you a great deal, that Israel basically has the final say on what's going to happen in Gaza. And the Americans, I think they are genuine. They are genuine about basically consolidating the ceasefire. Marco Rubio has made it very clear that this is a top priority for the President Trump. He has made it very clear, he and other officials, they are concerned that Benjamin Netanyahu might dismantle the ceasefire deal. But at the end of the day, even if the ceasefire works, even if the ceasefire basically is successfully, takes place in the next, few months, Israel will most likely never end its occupation of the buffer zone in Gaza. And this raises a big question. What's the future of Palestinian state, as you and I have been talking about it in the past few days?
Fascinating insights. Fawaz Gerges, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Professor, as always, really appreciate your taking out the time.